All right, so today we're going to look at, I don't know how long this is going to take, but we're at least going to start to look at the roles of men and women. And what we're obviously going to talk about, and to some degree, is also husbands and wives, which is a primary role or function of men and women, okay? Now, up front, I need to tell you that you have to understand, for those of you that really don't necessarily respect how leadership can work and Deuteronomy 17 and all of that, well, what do you expect a leadership person to do when the verses don't say very much about something? Okay? Then we have to be inspired, take what we can, glean out of it, and build an understanding from what limited stuff we have. So this topic is not very robustly spoken of in your scriptures. Okay? It just isn't. I mean, most of you, if you were in Christianity, you're all familiar with, like Ephesians 5 and 1 Peter 3, and, because that's where everybody goes and talk about it. A lot of wedding ceremonies have that in there, But there really isn't a whole lot. So in terms of the verses, now I did find a bunch of stuff that I thought could work and would make sense based on some of the things that some of the verses do tell us. So we're going to start in the beginning, in Genesis 1. Okay, starting to look at, so I don't know what the real title should be. I mean, I guess the role of men and women, but I really want us to understand why he made us in the first place. What was his expectation? We have in the past done a men's and a women's class, and the subject of the class started off in both classes, the ladies and the men's class, was what did the Creator have in mind when he made you? Okay? I mean, it's not what culture thinks a man should be or a woman should be. It's not what your family may have thought. It's not what society, by the time we're in 2023 now, compared to some other era of time. But what did the Creator who made us, intend for that to be? How was it intended to function? What was his expectations of us, okay? So let's look at the beginning when he made us. So in Genesis chapter 1 and in verse 26, all right? And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock and over all the earth and over all the creeping creatures that creep on the earth. And Elohim created the man in his image, and in the image of Elohim he created him, male and female he created them. Okay, let's stop right there. So we'll get that far to verse 27. So man was created to be in the image and likeness of Elohim. What does that mean anyway? What does that look like? I believe that seeing man, you should be seeing Elohim. That was the intention. That if you saw a human being, that human being would have been being Elohim-like. And so as Yeshua says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, I think that was the point of all of us. I guess that's why he's called the second Adam, right? That seeing him means seeing the Father. Seeing us, people should see the Father. They should see the Son. So man was to be like Elohim, properly representing who and what he is. That's the very beginning basic understanding. Now, of course, he said he created them male and female. Now, of course, how that all comes about, we don't get until chapter 2, right? But here, it just says that on day 6, he made them male and female. Now, so let's understand that both man and woman were meant to be a reflection of his image. We were supposed to be something that looked like him, the main thing being representing him appropriately. By representing him, I'm not saying I come on his behalf to represent him and say something, but like I walk around. Look, if you have a child, have you ever seen a parent, or if you've been a parent, you know with your child, you say, come here, you embarrassed me, you embarrassed the family. They didn't represent you well. Or if they do represent you well, you're proud of them. What that thing you just did, that's great. You made us look good, you represented who we are well. And so we talk about that when we do the mikvah, the idea of that when you are in the 8th declaration, you're declaring that you're going to walk out the rest of your life in such a way as to bring the Father and the Son glory and honor and not shame. How do you bring them glory and honor? By properly being their image, representing them so people see you, they know what seeing him looks like. Now, of course, if you're a disastrous mess, you're not representing him very well. And so it's our job to transform from that mess into him. That's why it says in Scripture to transform from what we are into what he is, to conform and transform into the image of the Son, so that then we properly are that image. Okay, we represent him properly. Then we continue here in verse 28. Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, bear fruit and increase, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over all the creatures moving on the earth. And see, I have given you every plant that yields fruit, seed, which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed to you for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is life, I have given every green plant this food, and it came to be so. And Elohim saw all that he had made, and see, it was very good, and there came to be evening, and then there came to be morning, sixth day. So, the Elohim-like man. Now, let's make sure I'm being clear here. We're talking about initially and originally, man was Elohim-like until man decided not to be, okay? So the Elohim-like man was to bear fruit of being Elohim-like, and multiply, bringing more Elohim-like beings into existence, okay? And fill the earth with Elohim-imaged people. People representing him correctly. That was the original intent, okay? And then to do this, man was given authority over the earth, and it says to subdue it, which means to bring under authority. Remember, not too long ago, before these verses, it started off with the earth was tohu vabohu. It was chaos and confusion, void and without form, whatever words you want to use to translate that. And so man is now being brought into be a part of the worker bees, so to speak, to bring this all into submission. Submission to what? Man's authority. Well, it won't give it our authority. No, we're here representing him. So we're bringing everything under his authority. Okay, if I'm president of the United States and you're my ambassador or representative and I send you to a country, who are you representing, you or me? You're representing me because I sent you there. Well, he put us here to represent him. Like ambassadors, okay? And so we were to bring the whole earth under his authority as we had opportunity, okay? He gave us that authority. Now, let's take that and go into chapter 2. And by the way, at the end of chapter 1, he says, when he finished all of creation, this is the only time when he finally says, it's not just good, it's very good. Okay, tov me'od, it's very good. Okay. So man is finally brought into it, and that's when he says it's very good before we basically ruin everything. Hey, it is what it is, right? Look, the birds and the fish aren't the ones ruining everything. Or the other beasts, or the sun and the moon and the stars, and all the other things he brought into existence, the plants and the trees, the fish, none of those things are messing things up. It's us, okay? We'll get to why that is in a minute. So in chapter 2, starting in verse 7, it says, Yahweh Elohim formed a man out of the dust of the ground. So this is a retelling of day 6 a little bit, okay? We've gone backwards to now say, okay, he did these things in the 6 days. Begins chapter 2 with creating the Sabbath day. The 7th day is the Sabbath day, the rest, okay? And now he's going to go back and now start to tell us about how man came to be. So he formed man from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden in Eden to the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So Elohim formed man, us, okay, out of the below, out of the earthly. We were formed, this is why we screw everything up. Okay, we were formed out of the earthly, and that would be fine, because the fish, the birds, all of these things were formed out of the earthly, but they were also programmed on how to exist in the earthly. That's how they know where to go, how to migrate, what they're going to do seasonally and how to do it. They don't need to be trained on anything. But then he did this really tremendously empowering thing that also screwed the whole thing up. Okay? He breathed the above, the heavenly, into us. Not that we became heavenly, but he breathed into us the ability to create, to decide, to think, to have that individual thought process. In other words, free will. See, the animals don't have free will. They're all programmed to do what they do. They do what they do because that's what they are, right? They don't really make a whole lot of choices. But when you look at us, it's because he breathed. This is an incredible thing. He didn't do this to any of the other creatures. He says he breathed into us. What? He breathed the above, the heavenly, into us. That doesn't make you heavenly. It gives you the potential to be heavenly. So you know, this is almost like having the knowledge of the tree of life and the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. You can make choices. Now, of course, he put trees there, so if they had taken that heavenly and just ate of the tree of life, they could have been just fine. But the potential was there to go the other way. We have the choice. So this is where I'm going to go on a slight rabbi trail just for a second here. So my writing in my notes here was that, so he formed us out of the below earthly, breathed into us the heavenly. So how do we take that metaphor to today? Well, I believe it's Ephesians 2, which is we were dead in our trespasses until he breathed into us or popped our bubble and brought into our minds the above, the heavenly. You see the analogy? Let's go to Ephesians 2 and look at that real quickly. And this is why this will not be one part. Okay? Because I added 20 verses here in Ephesians. But I want us to look at it from the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 point of view now, right? He says, and you were dead in trespasses and sins, verse 1, in which you once walked according to the course of this world. Okay, so you were earthly. You were the below. You were the fleshly. See, they started out in the garden. Now, bear in mind, we know that they got cast out of it, but when they were there, they had the above breathed into them, the heavenly, the spiritual was breathed into them. By the way, that's for all you charismatics and everybody else. It didn't make them any better, by the way. It gave them a potential. Because all these people think, well, I'm spirit-filled. Well, what are you doing with it? Which spirit are you filled with? Okay? Because where's the fruit is what he said, bear fruit and multiply. And by the way, multiply doesn't mean just make a whole lot more of you. Make more of you that are bearing good heavenly fruit, that are bearing my image correctly. So we were dead, like Adam basically was dead. He was brought into existence not with life in him at this point. And so that flesh had life brought into it. So he says here in Ephesians 2:2, it says, according to the rule of the authority of the air, the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. So when we were dead in trespasses, this is where we're now, after being kicked out of the garden, in that self-sovereign, I can do whatever I want, I can create, I can make my own choices, which is a heavenly idea, but it can be applied either for good or for evil. It can be applied correctly or wrongly, right? He said, among whom also we once lived in the lust of the flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind. We were by nature children of wrath, as also the rest. So when you're in the below mindset and you're filled and overflowing with the below spirit, the fleshly, earthly thing, then what is your mind, etc., makes you a child of wrath. Do you not see that very quickly after the exit from the garden, we get a bunch of angry people? Right? Cain gets real angry. Then by Noah's time, everybody's angry and doing all kinds of horrible things. I'm not just saying angry, but there's wrath. Wrath is anger directed at somebody, okay? With harm intended. He says, but Elohim is rich in compassion because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead. Don't just say dead in trespasses. We were dead. He made us alive together with Messiah. By favor, you have been saved. So let's look at that. So he said he made us alive. He breathed the above into us. He popped our bubble. He made us alive. Okay? And so if you want to put grace in here, I'm okay with that for one reason. When he says by favor, grace, even the way Christians think of it, you've been saved. In other words, he chose to pick you when he picked you. Now, you didn't merit that because he picked you at the moment he knew from that point you could do it. So in that sense, you merited it. But he popped your bubble. You did nothing to earn that. You were dead in your trespasses. So that part I'm okay even saying was unmerited. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you were dead, and he chose to breathe life into you. This is still going back to Genesis, right? So that we could be alive together with Messiah, which was the original intention for man, to be alive together with Messiah. He dwelled in the garden. Who was walking in the garden? Yahweh Elohim, not just Elohim in the fullness, but the Yahweh of the Elohim, which was Messiah. The Son interacted with man. Okay, the Father stays up in the heavenlies, and the Son interacts with man. You don't understand what I'm talking about? Go listen to the Do You Know the Father and the Son teaching, okay? Do you know the Father and the Son? So even though we were dead, not like Adam. Look, Adam wasn't his fault. He created him. He had no life in him. He just made him out of dirt. It's actually made him. He formed him, and then he put life in him. You already had a pulse, but you were dead in your trespasses. So he, as we see the image of it, or the type and shadow of it in Genesis, he comes and he makes you alive by touching you. He opens your mind to receive the above. Can we all admit that before he popped our bubble, we did not really have a good above connection? We didn't understand the above. We had no sight for it or desire for it. We just didn't know. Actually, we may have been Christian or whatever at the time, thinking we wanted it, but we didn't understand it at all. We really didn't. It just seemed like something we were supposed to want, so we wanted it. And a lot of us wanted it because the alternative really was terrible, so we knew what we didn't want. So anything would have been better than that. We didn't want the flesh. The flesh led to all this children of wrath stuff, and there was no rest, and it was terrible. So continuing. So in verse 6, he finishes, says, so we could be together with Messiah, right? He raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah Yeshua, in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding richness of his favor and kindness towards us in Messiah. In other words, so that we can now walk and bear his image, so that that would be seen by ages to come. See how this is exactly what they're talking about in Genesis? I've never done this before. I've never connected Genesis 1 and 2 with Ephesians 2. Okay, so this is new for you. All right, so verse 8, for by favor you've been saved through belief, and that not of yourselves is the gift of Elohim. It is not by works, so that no one should boast. Okay, so let me now repackage this for the 40th time, but it's in a new way. By favor you've been delivered out of the dead trespasses place through belief. What belief? His belief that you can make it, not your belief, his belief. Because that's where, and think about how this plays through. And not of yourselves, it's a gift of Elohim, because he believes you can make it. He picked you, not because of your belief. He says it's not by works, so that, in other words, you didn't do anything, except that he believes that you could and you would. Boy, doesn't that change that verse a little bit? Okay? For by favor, you want to go with unmerited? It's not really, though, because you hadn't merited it yet, but he knew that you could merit it. And so it's through belief, his belief in you, and not of yourselves. If it was your belief, it still would be of yourself. Right? Wouldn't you get credit for that at least? Because believing is a work, isn't it? Doesn't it take effort to believe at times? It is a work. But he believed, which is, I teach you this every Rosh Chodesh, right? When I tell you, you can get where you're supposed to go from where you are right now, because he picked you, which means he believes you can do it. Oh, okay, Ephesians 2:8 makes a whole lot of difference now. All right? This is why he says it's not by works so that anyone should boast. In other words, you did not do anything prior to bubble popping to earn that. But he also knows you. And he sees the end from the beginning. So he knows what you, if he bubble pops you, will do with it. He knows the potential that's there from that moment forward that you can get there. Okay? Again, remember why he created Adam. Created man and created woman. We didn't get to the creation of her yet. We will in a minute. But he created them to be his express image expressed in the world. So what is happening here with the second Adam? the waking up from the dead human beings to express his image in the world. Same thing, isn't it? It's incredible. It's like, praise Yah for that. I mean, it's amazing stuff. He says, in case we're not clear, look at verse 10. We are his workmanship, created, back to Genesis chapter 2, right? Created in Messiah Yeshua to do good works, to be his image expressed in the world, which Elohim prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So in other words, he prepared in advance before all things. Torah was ready and we have Genesis chapter 1. Before we see anything physical happening, let there be light. Day 1, let there be light. What light? Sun, stars, and moon? No, that's day 4. Okay, we have a teaching called Yeshua, the light of the world. So what light was brought into the world? That was actually a one-part teaching. Okay, what light was coming to the world in Genesis 1? Day 1? Torah, Yeshua, because Yeshua is the light of the world. So we know that the Torah is light. It's a lamp unto our feet. We know that the Torah is truth. You know, Yeshua is truth. It's all part of the fullness of understanding who and what he is, which, by the way, you can't really get until he breathes the above into you. Now, he doesn't breathe the full download of everything into you. He opens you up to be able to receive it. Then he has you seeking and asking and knocking and looking for those who will teach you so that you can hear him. A lot of you have heard a lot of teachers in your life, but did you hear him in those teachers? You heard some things that maybe wowed you and was impressive and so professional and entertained you, whatever, but you're looking for someone when they speak, you hear him. Not that person only. You hear him. But you couldn't hear him no matter what until your bubble got popped. That's the whole point. Look at, again, the Father and the Son teaching where it talks about how he has to give you eyes to see and ears to hear. He has to reveal himself. The Father reveals the Son, and the Son reveals the Father to whom they want at the moment they want. They choose the timing. They choose who and when. Okay? So we are his workmanship. He's molding us. I could go to the clay and the potter verses, okay? Didn't even add those in here. This is how it happens. I start working through things, and more verses come to mind, right? You are the clay. He is the potter. Is the clay going to say to the potter, hey, I don't like the way you made me, and, do something different? Those verses could be used here, too. He formed you. We're his workmanship. And we were created as Adam was, to do good works. What good works? The things that Elohim prepared beforehand, which is to bring Torah into the world and that man should walk in that. It's the instruction manual for man, Torah instruction. This is how you treat each other. This is how you treat me. This is how you treat yourself. These are the things that I expect out of you so that you represent me properly in the world. Okay? Verse 11. Therefore, remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who were called the uncircumcision by that which is called circumcision, made in the flesh by hands. So it's simply saying you were called a Gentile by those who were Jews. Don't get confused by Paul's words here. It's his idiomatic phrase that he likes to use. What is he saying? He's saying, look, remember, you were once Gentiles and you were walking in flesh. Okay? And you were called the uncircumcision, meaning uncovenanted by those who were covenanted. Okay, that's all that means. That at that time, what time? When you were dead in your trespasses, when you were Gentiles in the flesh. You were worldly. You were fleshly. You were above the below. He says, at that time, you were without Messiah. What happens as soon as they start going sideways in the garden? They get kicked out. So then they were without Messiah, so to speak. Okay, but he always works with a individual or eventually a remnant of people to keep the thing going because his plan will not fail. It's just a matter of who's going to fail to do it. It's not going to get to be a part of the plan. Okay? It's our choices. So at that time, you were without Messiah. Don't get mad at me, okay? All you Christians out there, I'm not picking on you, but you've been lied to. Okay? Without Messiah fully. What is fully? He's the truth, the Torah, the walking, talking, living word. Okay, if you love me, guard the commandments. Oh, no, it doesn't say that. It says guard my commands. He's the one on Sinai giving the commands. What commands do you think he's talking about to the Jewish people he's talking to? He's not talking to Gentiles. In John 14, he's not talking to Gentiles. He's not even talking to a big crowd. He's talking to his disciples. Okay? So when it says here that you were without Messiah, without your bubble popped, when you are not, it says trespasses, you're dead in trespasses. What are trespasses that he's talking about here? You were just a bad person? No, you were trespassing or breaching the law. You're breaching relationship by not doing and keeping the commandments. So now, of course, if you're a Christian, you've been told it's all been done away with, so you're not keeping these things. And you're not doing it rebelliously necessarily. They just lied to you. I told you that from the beginning. You've been lied to. You can get mad all you want. It's not going to change the fact you've been lied to. It's your choice how you're going to handle the truth when it's given to you. But until you embrace Messiah as originally intended, which is to lead you back into full covenant relationship, which is Torah observance and belief in the Father and Son correctly, you are without Messiah. Oh no, Messiah and I, we're like this. We're just so close. I know what it feels like to you in your delusional world. That's not mocking you. I'm saying until he pops your bubble, we're all in a delusional world. And even after that, we're only have a small hole in the pop there, so we're still mostly in a delusional world, and hopefully the hole keeps getting bigger, so the delusion keeps getting more, burned away, and we don't see that anymore. We now see the truth. But you need to understand is that when you are not, as I'm describing, you are without Messiah. You don't want to believe that. You're thinking, oh no, we're Gentiles and we're being told here we have Messiah. Not unless you embrace him in covenant. Oh, but I am covenanted. We're in the new covenant. There is no new covenant. There's a renewing of the old covenant. Okay? It's only new because of who he's making it with. The details of it are exactly the same. Which, by the way, goes back to Genesis. You can call this a covenant. He breathed the above into him with the covenanting that, remember, it says that these things were known from beforehand. They were prepared from beforehand. From before what? Before he even made man. You think, look, if you go to build something or make something, don't you normally sketch it out or get some diagrams or plan it out? And whatever you're doing, even if you're planning a trip, you make a little list of things so you know what to do and when to do them. You don't think that the Father planned out everything before he even started? That he knew, I don't think the Father anywhere in this plan is winging it. Okay? He planned it all out beforehand. That's why it says that Messiah, okay, it says that he died even before the foundation of the world. Like that was already in the plan. Okay? Not that he literally died before the foundation, but that was already decided. Now, so it says here, remember, at that time you were without Messiah and you were excluded from the citizenship of Israel. Of course, because to be a citizen of Israel, you have to covenant. Go listen to the Are You Covenanted teaching. And strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. I'm sorry, all of you Sunday-keeping Christians and every other religion in the world, but at least according to this book, which if you don't use it, fine, don't believe this book. But if you do, all you Christians do, then understand what Paul is actually saying. He's telling you you're in the wrong place, on the wrong day, in a relationship with the wrong being, thinking that it's Messiah. That's what he's telling you. I know, you're like, this guy's crazy because nobody would actually get up in front of a mic and say those things. Well, they're not me, okay? Now, of course, I also know that I'm speaking to deaf ears because until he bubble pops you, there's nothing you're going to get out of this anyway. Because you can't receive it unless he gives it to you to receive. I accept that reality too. Maybe one day when he pops your bubble, you remember some crazy Jewish guy was on the screen, talking about Messiah in the context of Torah, and then you will go back and try to figure out where that was. All right? Because that's what happens when you choose wrong. We haven't gotten to that in Genesis yet, but when you choose wrong, you end up dead. And he has to revive you. He's saying we were dead and he brought life back into us. We had a pulse, but this isn't life. This is existence. Do you understand there's a difference? We exist without Messiah. We exist without the breathing in of the above. That's existence. And as we should all agree, I'm going to guess we should all agree, existence sucks. Okay? It does. It's miserable. Existence is, that's why we have so many miserable people in the world, because they don't know this life. They only know about existence. And so they want to numb the pain of existing, because existing is awful and it's painful. Life is joyful and peaceful. But you can only get life from the above. He gave life to Adam. He could have made him just exist. Like the birds, the bees, the fish, everything, all the animals, they all exist. Okay? But we have life. Because with life, we have the ability to make choices. And I've told you in a teaching we did called Making Decisions, it's the reason you exist, right? Making decisions. That's why you're here. He wants to watch you make decisions. That's why you have free will, so you can make decisions. Continuing here. Let's continue. What do I want to say here? I want to make sure I've got my notes here. All right. Now, verse 13, in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once afar off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah. Okay? So, our being dead meant we were distanced from the Creator. Because those who have life are in the garden with Him. Okay? When you have life, you're in the garden with Him. Outside the garden, He only picks and chooses who He's going to spend time with. In the garden, He spends time with everybody in the garden. Now, once Adam and Chava made bad choices, He threw them out of the garden. Because that's His house. And so you don't get to stay in my house if you're not going to play by my rules. Every parent has that. And if you don't, you're a terrible parent. Okay? You're a weak, wimpy, terrible parent. If you have not told your children, this is my house, and you don't have to live by the rules, but you do if you stay in this house. You don't want to live by the rules, you have to go somewhere else. Okay, but it's my house, my rules. Oh, I don't think, well, then you can go somewhere else. But you have to have the ability to say that, though. And it takes a certain amount of strength inside to be able to stand up and say, you have the right, you have free will, do whatever you want. However, you can't do it in my house. It's my rules. You want to make rules, go get your own house. And basically that's what Yahweh said to them when He put them out of the garden. He says, you don't want to play in my house by the rules? Go out there, the whole rest of the world is your house. Do what you want. Now, if you want to come back into my house, you're going to have to learn how to play by the rules. That's really what this has all been about, getting back to the garden. Isn't that correct? I mean, we're all trying to get essentially back to the garden, where He is and we can be and live forever. That's Revelation 21 and 22 when we get to the new heaven and new earth. And we're all then going to be living in essentially this giant version of the garden. I remember when He made the garden, it was just Adam and then Chava, which we're about to get to. Now hold your place here, because I'm going to really explain the next couple of verses of Ephesians after we go ahead and bring Chava into the mix, okay? So hold your place here. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 2. It's not the way I wrote it in my notes, but I realize it's probably the better way to go about it. So let's do it this way. So in verse 18, so Yahweh said, it is not good for man to be alone. I'm going to make a helper for him as a counterpart. Okay, so I'm going to make a helper for him as a counterpart. So Yahweh sees that it's not good for man to be alone and decides to make a helper for him, someone to support and aid in his work. What is his work? His work at this point, is it tilling the ground? No. What is his work? Expressing the image of Elohim in the world. Okay? Whatever that is that Elohim is expecting from him, she's there to support and to aid in that. It says as a counterpart or as a helpmeet. Some translations have the word being against him, that she was created there as a helpmeet or a counterpart against him. Okay, I'm not going to disagree with that from this point of view. To be against him when he's not doing the work Yahweh gave him to do. Now, ladies, be really careful if you are going to jump out in that role, because what if you don't really know what Yahweh gave him to do? Because maybe you don't understand Yahweh that well yourself. And men, don't you have a problem with your wife being against you on some levels when you're doing all these wrong things? That's part of why he gave you her. So I don't have a problem with that. Okay, so I'm not encouraging the ladies to act in any wrong way. What I'm just saying is, if you're off doing what you shouldn't be doing, you know. By the way, speaking of things you shouldn't be doing, all of you out there playing chess right now, checkmate, I caught you. Okay, so some of you guys are just not doing what you're supposed to be doing here while I'm teaching. Okay, and some of you are wondering how in the world I knew that. Video games and other things. All right, so you're supposed to be listening to the word coming from above out of my mouth without distraction. And if you are distracted, then why are you here? I mean, if you go play chess somewhere else or video games somewhere else or chat with somebody wherever it's somewhere, you don't have to be here being bored by me apparently, whatever. I'm trying to give you life, okay? Look, I don't want to sound arrogant in any way, but you know, there's a verse used for Yeshua that I think applies to any Ephesians 4:11 teacher or prophet, which is, where else could we go since you have the words of life? Okay? Because I would expect any fivefold person to have the words of life. So you find one of those, why would you not be giving them your full attention? All right, now that being said, we're back in the garden here, okay? So he said that he says he realized that man should not be alone. He needs a helper, a counterpart, okay? And so then we drop down to verse 21. And it says, Yahweh caused a deep sleep to fall on the man, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. And the rib which Yahweh Elohim had taken from the man, he formed into a woman and brought her to the man. And he said to the man, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. The man said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one is called woman because she was taken out of a man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, and the man and his wife, yet they were not ashamed. So let's unpackage that a little bit. First of all, okay, Adam woke up from a deep sleep to find himself married and with a wife. Oh my gosh. Did you ever think of it that way? Hey, Adam, lay down, no problem, go to sleep, wake up. What? And he didn't have to go to Vegas to do that. You know. Or get drunk out of his mind and wake up and he's married, okay? Yahweh did this to him on purpose. Put him under a deep sleep. By the way, this is not to say that to have a wife and to be able to understand all that, a man needs to actually be unconscious, okay? So, but look, he was doing surgery is what he did, right? He was taking out the ribs, so to speak, so he put him under an anesthesia, so to speak. He knocked him out and took woman out of him. Now, but the woman, all you ladies need to listen. Men listen too, but from the right perspective. The woman was taken out from the man, formed to be able to be rejoined back to the man, to complement and to fill those gaps, okay? She was not taken out of the man to all of a sudden be in charge of the man, or to criticize and control the man, or to tear down and berate the man. She was taken out of him, and in essence, when we get married, we're becoming whole. Because both are incomplete, at least the way it's laid out here, until they come back together as one, okay? So then it says that man was to leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. So, men, why would you still be with mother and father? Well, if you're a child, you are. Ladies, don't you date anybody living with his parents unless they're much older and need care, okay? So we're talking about if you're getting married now, you've been a widow or you've been divorced, whatever, and now you're marrying in your 60s or something, and your parents may be in their 80s, and they may need help. So a man may be living there taking care of a parent. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you 20, 30, and 40-year-olds that have the guy you're showing interest in still lives at home with his parents. Men, and then what's worse is they get married and still stay in the parents' house. Scripture actually says you are to leave mother and father. No longer be a child and cleave to your wife and become one flesh. Okay, now this idea of becoming one flesh, we'll talk about that a whole lot more when it comes to things like Amos 3:3, which says two can't walk together unless they agree on how to walk. So how can you be one flesh if you're not in agreement? Okay? So then we finish off that part before we go back to Ephesians. So they were both naked. Basically, they were innocent. They were naked. They were exposed and naked, and they weren't ashamed. Okay? Because they hadn't done anything yet to be ashamed. They notice that they're naked after the problem with the fruit and the trees. Then they realize that they're naked. Because in verse 11 of chapter 3, Yahweh says, "Who made you know that you're naked?" That doesn't become an issue until their behavior exposes them. Their flesh is exposed, so to speak, as opposed to the above being exposed. It's clear that their flesh is coming out, okay, where everybody can see it. So I'm not wanting you to think about naked physical bodies, but just that the fleshliness has now come out to be seen. So they were exposed, all right? Because they were naked and everything was fine at the end of chapter 2. Or they were in the middle of chapter 2, right? I guess it's the last verse. They weren't ashamed. Why? Because they hadn't done anything to be ashamed of yet. Okay? Let's go back to Ephesians chapter 2. Now, it says that, verse 13, right? "But now, Messiah, you who are far off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah. For he who is our peace, who has made both one, having broken down the partition of the barrier, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, the Torah, the commands, and dogma, so as to create in himself one renewed man from the two, thus making peace, and to completely reconcile fully to favor both of them unto Elohim in one body, through the stake, having destroyed the enmity by it." Let's take this analogy to what we're talking about. Clearly, he's talking about, at least on the surface, the Jew and the Gentile, and really, even more importantly, those who should have known better that were now acting like Gentiles, being restored back into this one new man thing, okay? Well, let's take this into husbands and wives. Because after all, you also were separated, the rib from the man. And so, no surprise that there's an enmity between us that needs to be restored. Look what he says here. Let's kind of repackage this with this new metaphor analogy, okay? He is our peace. Some of you need some of that in your marriage. He made both of you to be one, right? He said he who has made both one. How did he do that? He broke down the partition or barrier. What's the barrier in your relationship? You know what it is? The enmity. Why is there enmity between men and women? I can tell you, I counsel a lot of people, women don't like men, men don't like women on some level. There's a lot of enmity there. It's hard to balance that to get through to where you love each other because there's always this issue. And what's the issue? I'll tell you what the issue is. What did he get rid of to fix the enmity? The commands and dogma, the instructions of commands of dogma. Not the Torah commands. I know in your book it says Torah there. It's the dogma of people. So what's going on here? So he's saying here, make sure I have my verse. Dogma is a set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. So he abolished in his flesh the enmity of your personal dogma about what a wife is, about what a husband is, about what marriage is. He's going to break all that down. That's going to get rid of the enmity. If you could finally get rid of the enmity, you could have the greatest marriage of all time. I know some couples that have had some real struggles. And guess what? When they finally got rid of the enmity, they're doing amazing. But what's the enmity? All that dogma. Okay, what's dogma again? A set of principles laid down by an authority, you being your own authority, each one of you in a marriage, and you each believe that your authority and these principles are incontrovertibly true. A man does this, a woman does that, blah, blah, blah. And this is why you guys all wanted this teaching, because you guys don't understand any of that stuff. You need somebody to tell you. Of course, then when I tell you, you're going to argue with it anyway, because of the enmity that's there. So he abolished in his flesh the enmity by bringing his dogma into it, telling you to knock it off with your dogma, so as to create in himself one renewed man, right? Man first, woman taken out, brought back together, that's a renewed man. Okay? So you have one renewed man from the two, thus making peace. A man by himself doesn't have peace. A woman by herself doesn't have peace. They think we find ways to have peace. And at some point, we get to that place where maybe we already had those experiences and now we get older, we're not going to have them again, and we have peace again. But I'm saying as originally created, we're talking about young people who were created incomplete, and that's why they're so screwed up until they can finally get to a place where they find peace in their singleness. But until then, we're all messed up. So I don't want any of you that are older that are single and at peace to think that I'm telling you that it's wrong to be single and at peace. This is really talking to younger people that this is why you struggle so much alone as a single. I hated being single, okay? I know a lot of guys are like, oh, I love it. I'm a player. I'm going to go be with all these women. And all. I hated being single. I felt incomplete, didn't want to date. I just wanted to find the one and be together. That was it, okay? I wanted that. I knew there was more missing than just sex, okay? Sex was available everywhere. It still is now, okay? It's available free. You can pay for it. Doesn't matter. It's available. I'm just saying. You got $45, you get what you want. But that's not the problem, right? Okay? Don't ask me how I know the price. Somebody told me one time. Probably with inflation, it's more than that now. I don't know. Find somebody desperate enough, it could be less than that. Go figure it out for yourself. No, don't. But I knew as a single that I wasn't wanting that primarily. I felt incomplete. I don't know how to explain it. Look. And my wife and I, we've had lots of issues over the years, and we've gotten to a place, I think, where we finally got this partition broken down, so we're doing amazing right now. But the thing is, I always knew that when I would embrace her, when I went over and gave her a hug, I felt one word I could think of, and I told her this right when we first got together, was like home. Like, it's a completeness. It was something about when I held her, not like anybody else I ever held. There was something about her that when I held her, it felt like it was a completing type of an action, okay? And so the reason people struggle, though, is the enmity. Why do we have enmity? Because of the dogma. Not this kind of dogma out of here. Stuff that came out of your own head and culture and history and generationally, whatever. What you think a man is and a woman is and a husband is and a wife is and all that other stuff. And I can't blame you for having it all in a screwed up way, because what kind of examples did most of us have? Okay, not very good ones. Anybody have enmity in the house they grew up in? Okay? Plenty of that. And so we're all messed up with that. But I want you to understand, this is another way that you can be taking such tremendous things out of Ephesians chapter 2. Okay? He says, look, you were once Gentiles. You were once a fleshly person, verse 11. And then with that, you were without all these things that you desire. So as a single, you might have desired these things too. I think Abba blesses you when you get older, especially after you've been widowed or divorced, and you get to that point where you now have completeness without all that. Okay? But he designed us to be fruitful and multiply, which means that we will feel incomplete at the ages where we can still do that. Well, we can still do those things, we would feel missing something. All right? Does that hopefully make sense? All right. So he says, but now, with Messiah drawing near, popping bubbles, getting us to find each other. By the way, if you go and find somebody who's not bubble popped, you're going to end up in a marriage that's a mess. You're going to have lots of enmity. Because two can't walk together unless they agree on that walk. Okay? See, some of you think, oh, but I like him. I like her. She's cute. He's good. Whatever. He looks good. Or he makes good money. Or she's this or that. She's so sweet. But are you going to walk together? I think those other things are great qualities too. You should be attracted to the person, and they should be nice and sweet and respectful, whatever it is. But are you going to walk together? I mean, if you're going to the kingdom and that's your focus, and it should be, if they're not focused on it the way you are, how can that make for a good relationship? That's going to make for a lot of enmity because people are going to get frustrated. Either one of you or the other or both are going to be always frustrated because you're not going in the same direction. And don't tell me, all you guys who are fighting, that that's not essentially the problem in every fight, is that you're not headed in the same direction on a particular thing, whatever it is. You're not seeing it the same, and that's why you fight. It could be finances, it could be social, it could be the raising of the children, it could be whatever. It could be anything. It could be the food you eat. I mean, you could be fighting over almost anything, the car you drive, whatever, because you don't see things the same. And by the way, you don't have to see everything the same, but you have to agree on how you handle when you don't. See, we have a very simple thing with our Creator. He's right, we're wrong. So if we don't agree with him, we know who has to change. But with a husband and wife, not so simple. Sometimes a husband should give the wife what she wants. Sometimes the wife should be without it because the husband will tell her, it's just not right for us to do that right now. And there should be an understanding of how that works, not the dogma that's going on in your head that you guys never discuss. Look, this is why I insist on, in premarital, counseling, that people do this expectations exercise that I always talk about. That's where they lay out their dogma. This is the dogma I'm bringing to the table. These are the principles of how I think marriage is supposed to be. This is my vision of a man as a husband. This is my vision as a woman as a wife. And this is how I think, this is incontrovertibly true. This is it. And then the person says, wait, that doesn't match my list. Now what are you going to do? And don't just think that it magically will go away. You have to deal with it. And don't think that some of these issues are really small. It's the small ones you fight about more than anything else. The big ones, usually we work it out. It's the little ones that really irritate us until we go crazy, and then we that enmity that gets real aggressive. Is this helping you now understand Ephesians from a whole nother way? All right? Let's continue here in Ephesians. So he says that this is to restore, to reconcile fully both of them unto Elohim. This is in verse 16. In one body through the stake, having destroyed the enmity. So Yeshua, through his death, destroyed the enmity between the Jew and the Gentile, so to speak. That was part of his intention. But also, this is a good metaphor for if you bring him into your life properly, it should destroy the enmity between husband and wife. The enmity in relationships. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean that all relationships are fixable. If you chose somebody where you and the other one do not have agreement on most things, that relationship is never going to work. So that's not an enmity problem. That's if you pick the person that doesn't want to walk the way you want to walk problem. So don't get this wrong. Now, I'm not saying I don't want you going back to your spouse going, see, if you would just do that, we would. The base core enmity that a man and a woman have, we're different, okay? That's what's being dealt with here. The fact that you guys don't agree on how to walk, if there's too many things that you don't agree on, you're not going to walk this out without a problem. And some of you, that means that it's not going to work because it's about coming into agreement on the walking. And it's that simple, okay? So don't misread me. I'm not saying that every marriage is fixable if you just do this. Every marriage should be fixable just doing this if you actually made the effort to pick somebody more wisely. Some of us did not have anybody to tell us that before we got married. To tell us we should be doing an expectations thing. Because I've heard many a person say, well, if I'd have known you were going to be this way, and a person said, what are you talking about? I didn't know you wanted me to be this other thing. This is why. The expectations were never discussed. Look, I'll use my own personal experience. When my wife and I first got married, there were certain things that she expected because her father always did them or her brothers always did them, so therefore a man does these things, all right? I didn't do them because that wasn't my experience with my father. I didn't have that example of the things that she always figured that a man did because that's what her father and her brothers did. And so she got mad at me, okay? Because after all, in her mind, it was an incontrovertible truth that men do this, because after all, the men in her life, that's what they did. It's like, that's not what I do. Doesn't mean that I couldn't do it, but it wasn't even on my radar to do because it wasn't my experience growing up. I didn't have a man in my life doing those things, but she did. So those are the dogmas that came in, okay? And I had ones that went the other way, things I had experiences that I expected of her that she never had that experience, so she didn't understand that either. So all of you who are hoping to get married someday, you need to make sure that you do these two things, okay? One, you must find someone that is bubble popped. That their commitment is going into the kingdom more than their commitment to just have a life being married, okay? Number two, that you sit down and find out, do you have agreement on how you're going to walk all of your life? Like all of the things, socially, financially, with your health, because I've seen people having health issues, meaning they're mad at the spouse because the spouse doesn't eat right or doesn't take care of themselves or won't take the supplements or won't go to the doctor or won't go to the dentist. I see all of this stuff happening, and then the other one's mad because the one is trying to push him to do all those things. Most of all, you got to agree on what do you do when you don't agree. Who gets to win that? Okay? Now, Deuteronomy 17 says you go to leadership for that. If you're married, husbands, you need to be able to make those decisions, and wives, you need to be able to let them. We're going to get to that here as we get into, eventually, Ephesians 5 and in 1 Peter 3, etc. Okay, we're going to get to those. But let's understand that, what this is talking about, right? Now, when we're talking about the becoming one flesh, bringing them together here in Ephesians into one body, right? It says here, having come, this is verse 17, he brought us good news, peace to you from afar off and peace to those near, because through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. Husband and wife, that should be the case. And you should no longer be strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the set-apart ones. Now listen to this again, the idea of building us, right? Having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and prophets, Yeshua himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building being joined together grows into a set-apart dwelling place. That's the goal of husband and wife, being built together into a set-apart dwelling place, okay? Into a dwelling of Elohim in the Spirit. Let's look at in 1 Corinthians 12. See, I'm not even going to get halfway through what I wanted to cover today. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 12. Is this good so far? Is this making sense? All right. 1 Corinthians 12. We're going to begin in verse 12. For as the body is one and has many members. Again, we're talking right now mostly about men and women. So a body is made up of, a whole body is made up of a man and a woman. Okay? But all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Messiah. For indeed, by one Spirit we are all immersed into one body, with Yehudim or Greeks, whether slave or free. We were all made to drink into one Spirit, for indeed the body is not one member, but many. Now, remember, we're still talking now, we're looking at this through a different lens. We're looking at it through a marriage lens, a man and woman role lens. So if the man or wife says, the foot, in other words, says, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong in the body, or to the body, does it therefore not belong to the body? This is where the husband or the wife doesn't want to work as a team, just wants to run off and do whatever it wants to do, independently. He says, if all the body was an eye, where would the hearing be? If all hearing, would there be smelling? But now Elohim has set members, each one of them in the body, even as he pleased. And if they all had been one member, where would the body be? In other words, it's meant to be different elements brought together. There are going to be some unique different elements. Look, I talk about this on a very regular basis with all of you. Okay, we go through the color code thing, which is funny because my wife's wearing red and I'm wearing blue. But for today, okay, but the personalities are the absolute hardest to mix, but the absolute, I think, in a lot of ways, best combination if you can make it work, because of the elements that they bring together, okay? The red, if it's properly functioning, should be big picture, visionary, knowing where we're going, leading to where we're going. And guess what the blue's going to do? All the details that the red doesn't pay attention to. Because the red needs blues to pay attention to details, and the blues need reds to see the bigger picture because they're so focused on details. Okay? And I think the intention originally, from a personality style point of view, was that men, by default, were intended to be red. I'm not just saying that because that's me, okay? I think that when you look at the characteristics, that's what he intended the red to be. To lead, have a bigger picture, have a vision, and to be keeping safe, protecting, providing, etc. There's all red things to do. And the blue was there bringing the nurturing, the caring, the intimacy, the relationship, and the focus on detail. Okay, if I take a red and blue and give them both the same test, the blue is going to do a much better job. So I'm not picking on the reds. Because the red's just going to try to get it to work and be done. The blue's going to try to do it right. Okay, that's helpful to a red person. Okay? So a man wants things to get done. And he should be married to someone who wants to help you get it done right. Now, of course, it's got to be right in a way that he agrees is right. Two can't walk together unless they agree. You can't just believe the way you, Mrs. Blue, want it to be right. Okay? Because remember, you're submitting to and supporting his vision. Sweetheart, how do you want this to be in the end? I want this. Okay, great. Now you go and do the best job you can to make that happen correctly according to that it'll do what he wants. And it'll be what he wants. And if he's red, he won't really care how you did it as long as it works. All right? So you have a lot of freedom if you just understand that in that context. And I think that the original intention was that. And I find that here's part of the reason why our world is so screwed up. You've got most women still have a huge blue side. That's not a problem. Problem is they don't have a red man to balance it. There's an incredible famine, I guess, or whatever, a lack of red, like a strength of red in the men today. Let's look at Adam and Chava. What went wrong in the garden? What color was she? She was blue. Oh, that fruit, it looks good, and it's going to make me smart, and I think this is the right thing to do, and has her own idea there. Where was the red man? Nowhere to be found. He's standing right there, and he's being actually all blue. He's allowing it to happen, sort of white too. He doesn't want to make an issue, doesn't want to create a scene. He doesn't want to jump in and get involved with this, Nachash who's talking to his wife. If he had been red, he'd have stepped right up and said, "Excuse me," to his wife, not the Nachash. "You don't need to be talking to him. I'll take care of this." And to him saying, "You don't need to be talking to her. Talk to me." All right? That's what he would have done. Instead, he stood back. And so also you see when Yahweh starts pointing out each one what they did. He went to Adam first. "What's this you did?" And the red Adam would have said, "My fault. I dropped the ball. I let her talk to him. This went sideways, and so it's my fault." Okay? Did he do that? No. He goes, "This woman you gave me, look what she did." That is not a red reaction. Okay? Then he went to her and said, "What did you do?" She reacts the same as him because they're both behaving with the same personality style. He's not acting red. She blames the serpent. "I didn't do this. I just was doing what I thought was right." All you blue ladies know how many times things blow up in your face and you thought you were just doing what was right. That can happen to anybody. Apparently it happened to Adam too. He was acting in that way. He thought, well, let her, Because I believe, other people don't agree, I believe he was standing right there because she eats and then turns and gives it to him and he eats. She didn't have to go look for him, okay? And apparently the garden was big enough to hide a little bit because then they start hiding from Yahweh after that. So this wasn't like a tiny little garden in the backyard and in a house in New York, which is on a 40 by 100 feet, So your backyard is only a few feet. I mean, this was a garden. I mean, it's an expansive area. Lots of trees, lots of fruit, animals and all these other things, and waters and lakes and ponds. It's a beautiful place. So he wasn't like wandering around somewhere. So we see where this is going sideways. So back to 1 Corinthians 12. All right? Let's see. Where was I up to? Okay, down in verse 18. But now Elohim has set the members, each one of them in the body, even as he is pleased. Okay, so he made man. Okay, and he made man first. Doesn't make him better or worse or anything, but that was what Yahweh did. Okay? Then he brought a woman out of the man. Not the other way around. See, I know a lot of you ladies miss this whole thing. You were made to be his helper, not the other way around. Well, I don't understand why he won't help me. He's not here to help you. You're here to help him. He's here to protect you. Well, he's not doing that. Okay, well, that's a different problem. He's here to provide for you. Well, he's not doing that. Okay, that's another problem. But he's not here to help you achieve all the things you want to achieve. He should create a space where you can go out and do that yourself. He's here to provide, protect, and to move everything forward towards the goal of the kingdom. He creates the safe space for all of the things to happen, raising the children, you to become whatever you want to be, etc. And you're there to help him. And by the way, help him doesn't mean you do whatever you think is helpful. You should ask, what can I do to help? What would be helpful to you? I can promise you, nagging is not helpful to anybody. But he's going to forget to do it. So let him forget, then let him own the consequences. Why is that such a problem? Oh, I know, because the blue side of you wants to make sure nothing ever goes wrong. Everything should be prevented. You're going to have to work that through. The negative sides of the colors have to be worked out. Okay, the red guys have got to get past their anger issues and their frustration issues with the world not moving along. And the blues have the same problem, except it's not about the world not moving along, it's about not doing it right. Okay? And so just understand that when we're looking at this, he placed everybody where he pleased to place them. So if he made you a man, that was his choice, not yours. If he made you a woman, that was his choice, not yours. By the way, let that be to all you geniuses out there. It was his choice, not yours. You don't get to choose. Well, I just kind of feel like, oh goodness, who cares what you feel like? It's his choice, he made you. Okay? And now he says, okay, and if all 19, and if they all had been one member, where would the body be? And now they are indeed many members, but one body. And an eye is unable to say to the hand, I have no need of you, or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you, but much rather, those members of the body which are thought to be weaker are necessary. Okay, are necessary. I got to go down to verse 27. All right. And to those of the body which we think to be less respected, these we present greater respect, and our unseemly members have greater seemliness. Whereas okay, so in other words, you are each to help make sure that the other looks good. I mean, in public, to people. Okay, don't do things to embarrass each other or to shame each other in front of your friends or other people. Okay, there's a real problem for the red side. Reds aren't paying attention to all of that. They're just doing whatever they're doing. Don't care who's standing around. That's not good. I do that on a regular basis and get myself in all kinds of trouble. All right? But ladies, you blues, you set us up sometimes. Because you do something you know is going to pop our cork in front of all your friends, but you do it in front of them knowing full well you're going to get the reaction. And then you look at us like, I don't know. I didn't do anything. You just started screaming. Meanwhile, you walked right over to the trigger button and went, boop. And then you have to like, I didn't do it. Both sides have issues, right? Both sides have lots of issues. All right. Okay, so he says, having given respect, greater respect to the one that lacks it. But there should be no division in the body, in a marriage between men and women, but that the members should have the same concern one for another. Okay, because if one member suffers, all the members suffer. And if one member is esteemed, all rejoice in it. You know, there's an old saying, but it goes in both directions, really. You know, happy wife, happy life. If your wife is suffering, you're going to suffer. Ladies, though, if your man is suffering, you're going to suffer. It goes both ways. I know the women in usurping authority push that whole happy wife, happy life thing. Because then it all becomes about the man just making sure you're happy. Not making sure he's happy. All right? Figure out what makes him happy. Oh, nothing makes him happy. Well, not only through your filter that you're putting on your ideas of what makes him happy. How about asking him what makes him happy? What would make you happy, sweetheart? Okay? Let me tell you something. If you have a really strong red person, like me, okay, I'll give you an example in my life. I don't almost ever need help with anything, in my own opinion, right? I don't really look for, but I love that my wife will ask. Just ask, hey, can I do anything for you? Do you need anything? And by the way, if you have a red person and you ask and they say no, don't get discouraged and don't ask ever again. Just every now and then ask, by the way, is there anything I could do for you? Do you need anything? And if they say no, that's good. That means that they're happy and everything's going along fine. But they'll appreciate that you're offering, okay? Offer to help. Now, I think that finished out 1 Corinthians, where we wanted to go with that. So, yeah, I think we can close here, which is good. We did our whole 70 minutes. And then we can really get into meddling with wives subjecting yourself to your husbands and all that other good fun stuff in Ephesians 5 next time. All right, I hope that was good for everyone. Let's go before the Father. Father, we come before you, and Father, we just want to pause now to appreciate and thank you for your words regarding your creation, us, that you had the love and compassion to give us your words and your wisdom and your understanding and discernment about this thing that we are that you made, these human beings, men and women. And so, Father, we appreciate that while you have not given such tremendous amounts of detail spread out all over the place, that I praise you that you gave me some insight to maybe take some other things that you've said and show how they actually apply here. So, Father, we want to thank you and ask that you would help us to really embrace that the enmity should be gone, that we should be able to get rid of all those dogmas that we brought personally into relationship, and truly embrace how you see your creation. You chose to form Adam, to form man, and out from man you chose to form woman. And then going forward, we kept reproducing and bringing more men and women into the world. And we seem to really struggle with being what you intended us to be. So, Father, we ask your patience with us, that you would continue to inspire us to be able to receive as you show us and instruct us on what that should look like. So, Father, we come to you now, asking all things and appreciating all things and praising your name in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.